The storm hit Millbrook, Vermont on a Tuesday night in early October, and by morning half the town was without power and the old wooden fence behind. Eleanor Whitcomb's house lay flattened across the yard like something had simply given up. Sarah Whitcomb stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee going cold in her hands, staring at the wreckage of a fence her grandfather had built with his own hands almost 40 years ago. It wasn't just wood and nails to her grandmother. It was the last thing James Whitcomb had ever built before he passed. And Sarah knew, without either of them saying it out loud, that its collapse felt like losing another piece of him. Eleanor was 78 years old, sharp as a tack, and stubborn in the particular way of women who have outlived almost everyone who ever told them what to do. She stood beside Sarah at the window, wrapped in a cardigan the color of dried lavender, and said only, "Well, it had a good run." Sarah didn't have the heart to tell her that the contractor she'd called had quoted $900 just for the labor. Between her grandmother's medication and the roof repair from the spring, there wasn't room in the budget for a fence, so she said nothing and made a mental note to look up how to fix it herself on a Saturday, and went to work at the diner like she did every morning. She almost didn't notice the moving truck 2 doors down. The Hendersons' old house had sat empty for the better part of a year, ever since the last owner passed, and Sarah had stopped expecting anyone to buy it. But there it was, a U-Haul backed into the driveway, and a tall man in a gray flannel shirt carrying a box marked "Kitchen" like it weighed nothing at all. She didn't think much of it. New neighbors came and went in Millbrook. What she didn't expect was to come home 3 days later, on her one day off, and find the fence standing again. Not just standing, rebuilt. New posts sunk into fresh concrete. The old boards salvaged and sanded down where they could be. New lumber matched in wherever they couldn't. Someone had even stained it to match the weathered gray of the porch. Sarah stood in the yard for a long moment, genuinely confused, before she heard a voice behind her. "Hope that's all right. I saw it down when I was moving in and figured somebody around here could use a hand." She turned around to find the man from the moving truck, standing at the edge of her grandmother's yard, wiping his palms on his jeans. He looked to be about her age, maybe a year or two older, with the kind of build that came from actual work rather than a gym, and an easy, unassuming smile that didn't ask for anything in return. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Daniel Whitfield. Just moved in next door." "Sarah," she managed, "you didn't have to do that. Let me at least pay you for the materials." "Nah," he said, shaking his head. "Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood gift. From me to you." He said it so plainly, so without any weight behind it, that Sarah almost laughed. Nobody just fixed a stranger's fence in this day and age without wanting something. But there was nothing underneath his offer except exactly what he said. She thanked him 3 more times before he finally waved her off and walked back to his own half-unpacked house, and Sarah stood there a while longer looking at the fence, feeling something she couldn't quite name. Over the following weeks, Daniel Whitfield became simply a fact of the neighborhood, the way the mailman or the barking dog 3 houses down were facts of the neighborhood. He mowed his lawn on Saturday mornings. He waved from his porch. He fixed the loose step on Eleanor's back porch without being asked, the same way he'd fixed the fence, appearing with a drill and a look of quiet concentration, and disappearing again before anyone could properly thank him. Eleanor took a shine to him almost immediately, which surprised Sarah more than anything else. Her grandmother didn't warm to strangers. She still called the mailman the new boy, though he'd had the route for 6 years. But something about Daniel put her at ease, and before long she was inviting him in for coffee whenever she caught him outside, and he never once said no. It was on one of those afternoons, with autumn light slanting gold through the kitchen window and 3 mugs of coffee going lukewarm on the table, that everything changed. Eleanor was telling one of her stories. She had dozens, most of them about James. Most of them Sarah had heard 100 times when she asked Daniel, almost as an afterthought, where his family was from. "Ohio, originally," Daniel said. "My dad grew up outside Columbus. He passed a few years back, actually. Cancer. My mom's still there, but I needed a change of scenery, so." He shrugged, the way people do when they're trying to make a hard thing sound light. "I'm sorry to hear that," Eleanor said, and meant it. "What was his name, your father?" Robert Whitfield." The coffee cup in Eleanor's hand stopped halfway to her lips. Sarah noticed it before she understood. "Why?" The sudden stillness in her grandmother's face, the color draining out of it like water from a cracked glass. "Grandma?" Sarah said. Eleanor set the cup down very carefully, as if she wasn't sure her hands would hold it steady otherwise. "Robert Whitfield," she repeated. "From Ohio. Did he serve?" "In Vietnam?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, he did. 1969 to 71. He didn't talk about it much." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had gone somewhere far away. "My husband James served over there too. Same years. He came home in the spring of 71, and for the rest of his life. He told me the same story every single year. on the anniversary of the day he came home, about a man who pulled him out of a river during an ambush and carried him 2 miles through the jungle with a bullet in his own shoulder to get him to a medic. James never knew if that man survived the war. He wrote letters for years trying to find him. He never could. He always said if he ever found him, he'd give that man anything he had. His name was Robert. Robert from Ohio. James never knew the last name. The man never gave it. Just helped him and moved on before James even woke up properly. James used to say there couldn't be that many Roberts from Ohio who served those same years in that same unit. The kitchen had gone completely silent except for the ticking of the clock above the stove. Daniel had gone very still, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. My dad had a scar, Daniel said slowly, on his shoulder. He told me once it was from the war, from getting a man to safety. He said it was the only thing he ever did that he was truly proud of. He never told me the man's name either. He said he never learned it. There wasn't time. And afterward, in all that chaos, he lost track of him. He used to say he hoped that man made it home and lived a long, good life. He said if he was lucky somewhere out there, that man's family was living well because of what he did. Eleanor's eyes had filled, and she didn't bother wiping them away. James lived 31 more years after that day. He built that fence in the backyard your neighbor is standing in front of right now. He walked his granddaughter down the aisle. If she ever gets married, she added with a small, wet laugh that broke through the tears. And he died in his sleep, in this house, holding my hand. Every good year we had after that river, we had because of your father. Daniel sat there absorbing it, his own eyes shining now too. He never knew, he said quietly. He spent his whole life wondering if it even mattered. If that man made it, if any of it meant anything in the end. It meant everything, Eleanor said. It meant every single day since. Nobody spoke for a while after that. Sarah sat between them, feeling like she was witnessing something that belonged to a world much larger and older than the 3 of them at that kitchen table, something that had been quietly waiting 50 years to close its circle. It was Daniel who finally broke the silence, his voice rough. I moved into that house because the price was right and it was close to my new job. I didn't know a single thing about this street, about you, about any of it. I just saw a fence knocked down and figured I'd fix it because that's what my dad would have done. He shook his head slowly, like he still couldn't quite believe it. He always used to say, help people, ask nothing back, and let it come around however it comes around. I think about that every day. I just never thought it would come around like this. Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand, the same hand that had held a drill fixing her porch step 3 weeks earlier, and held it the way she might have held her own son's. Your father saved my husband's life. And because of that, I got 31 more years with the man I loved. And I got her, she said, nodding toward Sarah, who was crying now too, quietly, without trying to hide it. You didn't just fix a fence, Daniel. You finished something your father started before either of us even knew your name. In the months that followed, Daniel became something closer to family than neighbor. He came to Sunday dinners. He brought his mother out from Ohio to meet Eleanor that following spring, and the 2 women sat on the back porch for 6 hours the first afternoon, trading stories about husbands who'd never quite left the war behind, laughing and crying in equal measure, like women who'd been friends for decades rather than hours. Eleanor gave her the letters. James had written all those years trying to find Robert. Dozens of them, unanswered, kept in a shoebox in the closet for half a century. And Robert's widow read every single one on the porch that day, holding her husband's memory in a new light she'd never had access to before. Sarah and Daniel, for their part, grew into something neither of them rushed and neither of them denied. It started slow, coffee on the porch, dinners that ran too long, a friendship that felt too easy to be anything but the beginning of something larger. 2 years later, they were married in Eleanor's backyard, beside the very fence Daniel had rebuilt the week they met, the one his own father would never know had. Reunited 2 families the war had quietly bound, together decades before he ever saw a river or a bullet or a young soldier from Vermont he pulled from the water without asking for a name. Eleanor lived to see the wedding. She sat in the front row in a wheelchair by then, her hands wrapped in a shawl, watching her granddaughter marry the grandson of the man who had given her a life she almost lost. When Sarah leaned down to kiss her cheek before walking down the aisle, Eleanor whispered only, "Your grandfather would have loved him. He'd have said the debt finally got paid. He just didn't know it would take 50 years and a fence to do it." She passed away 8 months later, peacefully, in her sleep, in the same house, the same room, the same bed where James had gone 13 years before her. Sarah found comfort in the grief that followed, in something her grandmother had said to her many times in those final months, that some kindnesses take a lifetime to travel all the way home, but they always find their way, eventually, back to the people who need them most. The fence still stands behind that house in Millbrook, Vermont, weathered gray now, matching the porch the way it was always meant to. Sarah and Daniel lived there still, raising their own children in the shade of the same maple tree. James once sat under and told his stories, teaching them, the way both their grandfathers once knew without ever meeting, that the smallest acts of kindness rarely end where they begin. They simply wait, quietly for the right stranger, the right fence, the right October storm to carry them home.